Alright, so a few weeks back, I reviewed the first episode of the Gentleman series on Netflix, and I shared my thoughts on what worked for me and what didn't. After finishing the entire series the other night, I thought I'd revisit my review and discuss what things changed my mind and what reinforced my initial take, as well as any surprises. Bottom line, this show has a great setup in the first episode, but does it pay off by the end? Let's find out. As always, grab your popcorn. Let's get started. The first episode set up the story such that Eddie Horniman, played by Theo James, inherits his family estate, skipping over his older brother Freddy, played by Daniel Ings, and he finds out that his late father had made a deal with a gangster named Bobby Glass, played by the always awesome Ray Winstone, to grow weed on the property. To make matters worse, Freddy owes a lot of money to another group of gangsters, resulting in him killing one of them. The main plot is essentially centered around Eddie's efforts to break free from the Glass family and protect his own family in the process. And to do so, he has to work with Bobby's daughter, Susie Glass, who's played by Cara Scaladario, as Bobby spends the entirety of the series behind bars. And it's really this relationship between Eddie and Susie that drives the show. Now, I don't want to give away too much of the plot because I think this is a series that's worth watching, and I don't want to spoil it for those of you who haven't given it a chance yet. But here's what I thought worked. The characters are what set this show apart, in my opinion. They are as varied and colorful as they are plentiful. And it's one thing that Guy Ritchie always excels at, besides the dialogue. And that's a huge plus here too. And I think that fans of Ritchie's past work will be happy with what the characters have to say and how they say it. I also really like the plot. The way Eddie tries to use both his military training and his upper class upbringing to his advantage, even when he's out of his depth in the criminal underworld, is as fun as it can be unpredictable. Going into it, you can't really tell if he'll be successful or not in the end, and that level of uncertainty only adds to the fun. On that note, the back and forth between Eddie and Susie is great, changing their dynamic from episode to episode. One moment they're best of friends, and the next, they can't wait to rid themselves of the other. And it's not made any easier since there's a clear attraction between the characters. Now, I don't know if that's thanks to the strong writing or the casting choices, as Theo and Cara have a ton of on-screen chemistry, and it's used well in this show. To be honest, I would have liked to see them take it even further, and then be forced to deal with the consequences of such an act, especially since their worlds don't mix at all. Either way, the constant conflict and ambiguity of the relationship works well, as both have huge trust issues and turn on the other multiple times throughout. By the time the finale hits, you don't know where either stands or if they'll end as partners or enemies. The series also dives into a number of subplots revolving around the various characters such as the always stoned head weed grower Jimmy, played by Michael Wu, and the caretaker Jeff, who's played against type by Guy Ritchie regular Vinnie Jones. And I found Vinnie's arc intriguing in particular. Whereas he's typically portrayed as a hitman or ruthless gangster, here he's a level-headed and loyal employee who tends to be the voice of reason rather than the one you send to fix problems in a violent way. In the end, he's a fairly small part of a larger ensemble piece, and I was hoping there would be more to him, especially when it's revealed that his connection to the family is even closer than it first appears. But by the end, we're no closer to finding out the details of that backstory or its effects in the long run. And after the first episode, I said that the pacing might be an issue. To be honest, it's not at all once you get into the show. It takes its time fleshing out the characters and storylines, and I think that's a good thing. This is a show that doesn't treat the viewer like an idiot, and I'm glad to have been proven wrong on this point. And I also said that I hoped going into the show that there would be a tie-in to the movie, particularly with some of the characters. There isn't, and in retrospect, that's probably for the best. This way the show stands completely on its own as a separate entity, and fans can enjoy both without the other to distract or take away from either. And that leads me nicely to what I thought needed work, which I'll admit right off the bat is nitpicky at best. I thought overall that Giancarlo Esposito is underused as the mysterious Mr. Johnston. He plays a big hand in the story to be sure, but it's usually off-screen, so we never get more from him than the occasional dialogue scene with Eddie. Likewise, I would have loved to see more of Ray Winstone. Bobby Glass fits him to a T, and he's one of the masterminds in the story. It's a shame we don't get more from either of these amazing actors. And I stand by what I said about Eddie after the first episode. The entire series shows him as being a hair's breadth away from snapping and resorting to violence. But he never loses his composure. Not once. Even when he resorts to violence, it's always because he needs to and always with a cool head. I still think it would have given him more of a character arc had his anger flared up just once in the early going, and he'd have to learn to overcome that side of himself. As it is, though, he less grows as a character than learns to accept his place in the criminal world. Really, it's his brother Freddy who has the biggest arc. He goes from a selfish, drug-addled prick to a guy who's willing to sacrifice himself for the family. And the way Ings plays the character with such earnest glee makes me want to see anything else that he's in. I also said last time that Eddie put me in mind of Michael Corleone as a man who gains power but doesn't want or expect it, and yet he's utterly suited to wielding it, especially when it means protecting his loved ones. This series even ends on a Godfather-esque sequence where Eddie and gang go about cleaning up the opposition. However, while this is a nice way to bookend the series, I found it to be a bit anticlimactic. The final episode starts off strong, building on a cliffhanger ending for episode 7 that literally places a dangerous gang on Eddie's doorstep, ready for a gunfight to the death. But a simple phone call ends it before it can even begin. And the rest of the episode is basically a series of conversations and backroom deals. Yes, there's a little bit of violence to tie it all together, but nowhere near the amount that typical Guy Ritchie films offer. And that's a shame. One thing I love about Ritchie's films is the way they end in a little of the ultra-violence. And usually in some way that you can't predict. That wasn't quite the case here. Still, it's nitpicky as I said. Overall, The Gentleman is a great series. I hope it does well enough in viewership numbers to warrant a second season, because I will definitely be there to watch it. But those are just my 2 cents. Give me yours. Let me know if you've seen the Gentleman series and what you thought of it in the comments below. Don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to my channel, and hit that notification bell to stay updated with the latest content. Until next time, stay creative.